honey badgers. It's been a little bit since we did long form content, so thought I'd give this a try again. Let's see where to start with this. It's been a minute since I've been on camera either with face or voice, so I get a little out of practice doing this outside of the short reels. But this whip and chat, I'm going to try to film it. I'm still having some issues with my desktop processing and all that. It's just an older computer, and yeah, I'm still fighting with it a little bit. So I'm gonna try to film this. I'm not entirely sure when it's gonna go up, but I'm gonna film it. I'm gonna try to edit it and see if I can still get long form to process on my desktop without it freaking out. I tweaked some settings on my computer, so hopefully that's enough to have it cooperate, because I do want to try to get things other than just the reels on the channel. The reels are fun to do, but I prefer having a mix of different content ideas and setups and stuff for my channel. So this particular whip and chat was actually inspired from a power outage I experienced, I think it was a couple nights ago at this point. Wasn't any storm going on at that time. It has been pretty stormy around here a good bit lately. I read the other day that apparently it might be tied to a super El Nino storm system that is just going to be parked or traveling back and forth over the US for the foreseeable summer, I guess. So it's I guess we're just going to have a summer of temperamental weather here and there, and none of that was going on the other night. This was in the middle of the night when it happened. So, and I live just a few miles away from the main power plant that serves basically in the entire county for the area. So a lot of times if there's no storm, if there's no major wind and you still have a power outage like that, usually it's like they just shut off part of the grid for either repairs or upgrades or something like that. So I'm guessing that's what happened. But the unfortunate thing is, even though I've been seeing a lot of people try to clarify online that officially summer isn't supposed to start technically calendar-wise until the 21st, pretty much everybody in the South, as far as I've talked to, we all consider it summer now, because back a while ago, you know, when I mentioned we had that system that went through that had like a week straight of rain hit North Carolina. Right after that system passed, the summertime heat came in, and it hasn't really left too much. We've had a few afternoons here and there where it's been pretty mild, but for the most part, the summer heat is here. The starter summer heat. I've seen all the reports going around about when they had the soccer games come over here, and all of the international players, at least from the UK, from what I've read. I don't think other people are having as much issue so much, but the UK players, they're all freaking out, I guess, over the US heat. And it's funny because the reports I've read have largely been coming from like the West Coast heat, and has someone who was raised in West Coast heat. It does get hot, but West Coast heat is nothing compared to when you come to the heat of the South. And it's just getting started over here. It's going to be freaking miserable in about June. Well, it is June now, but like July and late August are when the real summer hell temperatures start kicking in, which is why I've said in videos before that this is one of my least favorite things about living in the South. There's a lot that I do like about living here, but the heat, the way it gets all sticky and like humid and just, yeah, I don't love heat combined with humidity. The heat I was raised in is that dry heat, the desert type heat, which is still hot, but I don't know, like, I guess because I was raised in it, it doesn't bother me. When I moved out here and you get like heat, like drier heat combined with like sticky humidity, it's not a pleasant feeling on the body. And then you have months of it. It feels like the longest season in the South. which is why I've said in past videos why I get so excited for like the colder holiday season when that comes in and it hits like late September, and then you hit the holiday season where it's like October, November, December, and you get Halloween and Christmas and all this. That's my favorite time of year. I get so excited for that, and I've said in past videos that I look at that time as like my reward for surviving the summer every year, because it's sticky and it's a lot for me. But I do it every year because I've lived here for, I don't know, like close to 20 years now, something like that. I forget the exact number. But yeah, I've been here a minute and I still dread it every year. But it was particularly bad that night when we had the power outage, because it was rough. It's already started getting into like anywhere from 85 to 95 degrees at night. And when the power went out and there's no way to move air around the house, it gets kind of brutal. So yeah, the power, it flickered for a little bit, it came back on, and I was like, okay, maybe it's just a little bitty thing. And then it went off again, and I waited, and when it still didn't come on for like 10 or 15 minutes, then I was like, all right, I better go get the candles. And good thing I did, because it ended up lasting a few hours. And then I checked on my phone, and I saw my phone only had like 30% power, and I was like, okay, well, just not that I was anticipating anything bad happening that night, but just having been through disaster situations in the past, anytime I see stuff like that, as far as like low battery, instinctually I'll think, okay, I better turn this off and conserve the power just in case I need it for something important. So I turned off my phone in case I needed to get a hold of somebody, something bad happened. And then I was sitting there in like darkness and a little bit of candlelight, slowly going bored out of my mind. So then I thought about, I had this stack of books. A lot of them are cookbooks, but like a stack of books I've been meaning to go through, that are books that I need to decide if I really want to hold on to or not, or if there's anything from them that I want to pull to inspire future projects, and if not, to let go of them and all that. But I just haven't like sat down with them. So yeah, I just ended up pulling a book out of that stack and trying to read by candlelight, all Abraham Lincoln style. And so yeah, that's what inspired this WIP and Chat. Is the intro to the one I ended up picking up is this book I've had for, I don't know, probably a good 5-6 years, something like that. It's been in my cookbook collection. I don't use my cookbooks as much anymore. I used to collect a bunch of them, but as my as my autoimmune stuff has progressed, one of the symptoms, I guess you'd say, that I've experienced over the years is that having had the conditions in my body for several years now, the stuff I have, it's the type that's like, technically it's labeled as congenital, meaning that my parents coded it into me when they made me, unaware. My parents both passed before any of my diagnoses like this came in, but yeah, that's what the doctors told me, is that everything I have in me is all congenital form. But apparently a lot of the stuff I have is like late forming congenital form type, where you have the coding for it, but it, as far as it actually setting off in your body and creating stuff, I apparently have latent types, where it just sits in the body and decides to pop up later in life, as opposed to like early childhood. So yeah, the big symptoms didn't set in really till the past few years, really. And one of the symptoms I ran into is that as I've had this stuff in my body longer and longer, and you know, as you just typically naturally age as a human, right? The damage to like the internal organs, the wear and tear, gets more noticeable. So a lot of the stuff that I could stomach food wise before is kind of off the table. And it makes me less inspired to get really inventive with cooking. I still putter around the kitchen here and there just to like practice making stuff. But there's like, as far as what I can actually eat, I'm on that more like safe foods kind of lifestyle now, where I have to be careful about what I'm ingesting so it's not gonna upset things. So that's why I've worked through a lot of my cookbooks, seeing like what I can actually use, what recipes could I actually end up eating realistically. And it's kind of sad because I have a lot of books like this, because Asian style food is my, well, at least for the longest time, it was my favorite type of food to eat, largely because when I was growing up, my mom's best friend was Filipina. And she was also my like day-to-day babysitter when my mom was at work, and couldn't come get me from school or the bus or whatever. She would just tell me in the morning, okay, you're going to go over to Cora's house. And then I was like, oh, okay. So there was that. And then one of my brother's best friends in high school was a mix of Japanese and Irish. And his mom was one of the teachers at my elementary school, and she would make stuff for students all the time. So there were different aspects I had growing up, and also my dad living in Okinawa for the early part of my life. And I think I've mentioned maybe in past videos that my grandma was born in Korea, and not my grandma, great grandma was born in Korea, her mother. And then my grandma was, traveled all over the world with my great grandparents, being, military tied and all that. So yeah, I've had a lot of exposure mostly to primarily Asian and Mexican food. So that's a lot of what I pulled from like my cooking experiences and what I tend to eat day to day. And like now the bulk of my safe foods is built around noodle and rice bases, because I can still stomach those pretty much, but just not heavily super spiced, I guess, because like the lining of my organs and stuff have wear and tear on them. So yeah, a lot of these cookbooks that I have from the past are ones that I have to let go of a lot of, because realistically some of the stuff they bring up in here I'm not going to ingest. My system can't handle it that well anymore. But I still went through them, and in the beginning of this book she goes over a lot of interesting like little factoids about spices that I thought I would just share at the beginning of that. I'm not going to go over all the recipes. This is the book, The Spice Merchant's Daughter. That is the name there. I hesitate to pronounce that because I'm not sure where the emphasis goes on which syllable. But yeah, that is the book. I'll try to see if I can find it on Amazon and link it down below if you want to check it out. But yeah, this is the author herself is a native of Malaysia, but she is now based in where was it? Oregon? Portland? No, Seattle. Sorry, I knew it was like somewhere in the Northwest. Yeah, Seattle, Washington is where she's based now. So this book is kind of a combination of her talking about things that she grew up with in Malaysia, and then how some of that translated and got inspired or re-inspired or reimagined, I guess, once she settled in Seattle and started raising her family there. And lots of, I'll give you a look at the interior, lots of mix of black and white and color images. Idea of the food there. But yeah, there's some interesting little factoids in the beginning talking about spices, and I'm a big fan of, well, I've mentioned history, but especially food history I find particularly interesting. So yeah, I just thought I would share some of the stuff she talks about in the beginning. And you guys can comment down below, and just don't come for me if I say something that you're like, that's not true, because I don't know. I'm just sharing what's in her book. If you would like to argue in the comments, feel free to comment down below. Just don't attack me for it, because I'm just sharing what's in the book. All right, so kicking this off, the spices she talks about, some of it is spices, some of it is just kind of meal ingredients, meal preparation techniques and stuff like that. I'm pretty much just focusing on the spice factoids here that I thought were interesting. I'm not going to go over every one that she covers in the book. I just picked out the ones that kind of stood out to me the most. So starting off, she talks about cardamom being part of the ginger family. Hold on, it's supposed to be a whipping chat. I guess I should get to whipping, huh? What was I doing? I was doing the letter P on here. Okay. So, yeah, I was working on this one the other day. I think I've hauled this in a video not too long ago. This is Diamond Dots Pepper Bon Appetit. It's just a little partial of peppers. Been having fun with that. Pretty much just did all of the symbols that were a little bit trickier to see, just so I wouldn't have to struggle with that on camera too much, and then left the last two colors I have here to do this little whip and chat. So that's where we're at now. So we're working on all the P symbols here. So yeah, cardamom being a member of the ginger family, which I thought was kind of interesting and surprising, because for some reason I've always associated cardamom with just being, I don't know, like cinnamon or chocolate family. Like, I guess because that's typically, when you're cooking, that's typically what you see them combined with in a lot of like desserts and some savory dishes, but desserts especially, you see cardamom and chocolate and cinnamon kind of interchangeably used. So I thought it was interesting to find out that it was actually part of the ginger family. Speaking of cinnamon and some other ones I'm going to mention in a little bit, I was surprised to see how many spices she talks about here end up being part of the evergreen tree. I mean, I knew that cinnamon came from bark, but I guess I just never really thought about like what kind of bark. But yeah, apparently cinnamon comes from an evergreen type of tree, and the tree they get cinnamon from can grow up to 30 feet. And another thing she mentions with the cinnamon, as far as like, you know, family stories, you know how cookbooks go, where it's like the recipes, but also stories about family and travel and things like that. They tend to tie to the recipes they're featuring. So she's got one in there where she's talking about a story about how when she was growing up in Malaysia, it was common to see candy that was basically just cinnamon stick dipped in sugar. And that was it. That was the candy. And I was sitting there thinking that, I mean, my first thought was like, that sounds kind of intense, because I don't know if people really do it anymore. I don't, it might be a little bit old school. I think people have moved on to more intense challenges. But when I was a kid, everybody used to talk about doing the cinnamon challenge. And also a few years ago, when I was still part of the, you know, firefighter wives club, cinnamon challenge is something that still comes up from time to time around fire departments when the guys get bored. So that's what I was thinking of, is like, I mean, obviously cinnamon sugar goes together well, because, you know, thinking of like cinnamon toast crunch, and like if you're a poorer kid, you probably grew up with the cinnamon sugar dust on the buttered toast, which is still amazing sometimes. It hits one of those hankerings that nothing else can some days. That was a big like treat thing when I was growing up, and if my mom didn't have a lot of money, or you know, didn't have any like sweet things in the house, that was one of the things she used to do. She used to like toast up pieces of bread and slap some butter on it, and then she had in her spice cabinet, she had a container that was like just sugar, and then one that was just cinnamon, and then she had another one that was specifically cinnamon sugar combined. The combination of cinnamon sugar doesn't surprise me, because that's used in plenty of specialty drinks as well. But I was just thinking about like the intensity of cinnamon by itself and then just plainly dipped in sugar. I don't know. I was like, is that not gonna, like, I'm sure the first few seconds of it would be great because you're getting that sugar initially, but like once you're just there with the cinnamon stick, isn't that gonna be like a lot for a candy experience. But then I was thinking, you know, when I was growing up down the road from Mexico, basically, one of the popular things, I don't know how much they do it now, it's probably still around, but when I was a kid, one of the popular things in Mexican culture was candy that was dipped in chili powder, which, like, I didn't hate it. It's just not something that I ever grew up loving. I mean, I would eat it every once in a while. I think the ones I liked the most were the ones that were just like lime candy flavored, because that, like, in my brain, that made sense to have like lime combined with chili powder, because I mean, that's kind of up there with like salsa and taco seasoning and stuff. But when it was on other candies, I thought it was a little, like when it was on apple candies or something, I thought it was a little bit weird. So yeah, it's just like a personal preference thing, I guess. Yeah, I just thought that was interesting. Do you have anything that you can think of where you grow up that is perfectly normal to you, as far as like cultural candies that might sound weird to other people? No shame, I'm just curious. Because it had me thinking about things that I grew up with, where I'm like, oh yeah, no, I guess that you know, there are some things that you grew up with that are perfectly normal because they're in your region, but then when you mention them to other people, they might be like, oh really? Then cloves was another one. She said that cloves, also an evergreen, which I was a little bit surprised. I think I also knew that cloves came from like a tree type, but I was just surprised at all these things apparently coming from evergreens. But yeah, a pyramid-shaped evergreen tree that grows up to 80 feet. And then another thing she was talking about as far as like where you use cloves is she mentions using it in coffee. And this was another one where I was like, is that, I don't know. I've never actually, I mean, I'm a big coffee drinker, but I've never actually had cloves in coffee. I don't think I've used cloves in cooking before, naturally. But I don't think I've ever put it in my coffee before. So I was kind of wondering if that, I don't know, like, having never experienced it, it sounds kind of intense, but if you've had it, maybe you want to describe it in the comments below, if that's an intense thing or not. I've had coffee with chicory in it, which also comes from like a woody type source. So I don't know if that would be similar. Leave your thoughts below if you have any. Next one is coriander. And apparently coriander is the dried seeds of the cilantro plant. And one thing I kind of laughed at is she talks about cilantro a little while after that, naturally. And she mentions cilantro being distinctive in aroma and with a warm, sweet, fruity flavor. And I just thought of a couple of my friends that have that condition that makes cilantro taste like soap. I don't have that. To me, cilantro tastes like I would think it would taste, as far as like that sort of, it's got a little bit of bite to it, but that sort of like grassy, herby type flavor you would expect, because it's green. It looks like a plant. You'd expect it to be sort of plant-like. So that's the way it is for me. But I do have a couple friends that have that thing where that like trait in your taste buds or something that people develop every so often that makes cilantro apparently taste like soap. So yeah, I just thought about mentioning that to them. They're like, do you get a warm, fruity flavor from cilantro? And some of them would be like, hell no. Not at all. So yeah, I just had a little laugh over that. Next one is cumin. She mentions cumin originating in Egypt, but coming into Asia over the centuries via the spice route. I have cumin in my cupboard. I don't use it a ton. I think I mostly use it when I'm doing like poultry dishes. I use it a little bit as sort of kind of similar to like a mustard base. If I want something that's got a little bit of like mustardy heat, I might use cumin. Fennel. She says India India, the country India, uses fennel in doorways to ward off evil spirits, and they also believe that it helps keep young people strong and healthy. But she does make the distinction that in Southeast Asian cooking, typically only the seeds of fennel are used. Fennel is another one that I had to grow into a little bit as far as flavor-wise. I don't mind it in teas, I've found. When I've tried teas, I mean, I still don't partake of it a lot, but I don't mind it in teas as much. One thing I struggle with fennel is that I cannot stand black licorice. I find black licorice to be one of the most disgusting candies on the planet. Maybe that's my form of cilantro, because I know plenty of people that love black licorice. To me, it tastes like I'm chewing on tires, which is funny because I love red licorice. Red licorice is actually one of my favorite candies because I love like chewy, gummy type candies. But I cannot, from the time I was a kid, I cannot stand black licorice. I try it again every so often to see if like I've had that advancement in my taste buds, but nope, that is one that is sticking solid. That and cotton candy also, like the texture of cotton candy weirds me out so bad. I can't think of anything except fiberglass insulation whenever I've tried cotton candy. It's just texture-wise, it weirds me out. I can't stand it. So like those two are a couple of my least favorite flavor things on the planet. So yeah, that's I had a hard time getting around that for years with anything that had, because fennel to me has a very similar taste to that's all my brain tends to think when it's in like food. My brain associates it so strongly with black licorice, that's all I can taste. But in recent years, I've tried a few teas that have a little bit of fennel in them, and I don't mind it as much when it's in like a light tea. So what's the next one? Mustard is the next one. Mustard, it's mentioned, it appears in Sanskrit records dating back to 3000 BC, which I'm not particularly surprised by because it is mentioned in the Bible. So you'd figure it's been around a minute, right? So I have a question for you guys as far as the mustard thing goes. Are you particular to yellow or brown mustard? Because speaking of things that, you either favor or you don't, I don't particularly love yellow mustard. Yellow mustard is really popular in the States, but it's never been one of my things. I also don't really do ketchup that well because even that's another one from the time I was a kid. I don't really love ketchup because when I try to eat ketchup, basically all I can taste is pure sugar. I don't really get a lot of tomato flavor from ketchup, so it's not really one of my things. But that's fine because I'm I'm here to I guess I was put on the planet to weird people out and be one of those Americans that preaches their love of French fries and mayo. I don't know why that's not more popular in the US, because whenever I do it, it tends to weird out my friends because I don't like ketchup. But y'all, if you haven't tried it, you need to go get you some French fries and some good mayo. And it's life-changing. Like, for me, I don't understand why people eat ketchup once they've had like a French fry in mayo. It's like, it's a potato in mayo. How's that going to be bad? But I get that there are also people that don't love the texture of mayonnaise and all that. So we're just talking personal preference. We're just having fun with that. I'm not, not here to knock anybody. Taste buds are weird things. Everybody's is just a touch different, Let's see. What's the next one? Nutmeg. Nutmeg is another one that apparently comes from an evergreen tree. This one growing up to 60 feet. She does give you a tip if you ever have to buy nutmeg in the whole form. which I don't know if I've ever done before. I think anything that I've cooked, it's just been fine to just get the, the shaker containers. But if you are ever in the market to buy nutmeg in the whole, she mentions if you pick one up and you shake it and you can hear the inner core rattling, that's a sign that it's good quality. So anybody that can use that tip there you go. I am just flinging these things everywhere. I was just reminded of that that I don't know if they still promote it, but there used to be a commercial that went around online for Dreamer Designs, and part of what they mentioned was how diamond painting was so much of a not messy art form or hobby or whatever you want to call it to get into. And by the time I had seen that commercial, I think I'd already been into diamond painting for a few years, but I just remember having a laugh over that because if you talk to anybody who's been doing this for a few years, we all have tray spill horror stories and all of that. And, we all find the little drills in the weirdest places. Even when I think I'm being really clean with diamond painting and stuff, I'll still somehow find them in my bra sometimes. Don't know how they get in there. But yeah, I just thought that was funny. It's like, oh, it's such a non-messy thing to get into. I'm like, is it? Is it? Anyway, what's the next one? Paprika. Paprika coming from dried sweet chilies. And apparently the bright red paprika that you typically see in stores, I mean, there's a few different varieties you can get, but I think the bright red is the kind we are used to seeing so much in the supermarkets, at least here in the States. Apparently that is known as Hungarian paprika. And then she mentions if you ever see smoked paprika on the shaker bottles, smoked paprika generally means that you're getting ground chilies mixed with sweet bell pepper to give it that smoked variation. Let's see. Let me get this. The shadowing up on top here is a little bit tricky, so let me get that one real quick. What's pepper? Okay, talking about pepper. This I thought was interesting. I guess I never really thought about it before, but she's talking about, in the section about pepper, she's talking about how it grows on a vine. And the variety that we're typically used to seeing is, she says, primarily native to East Malaysia. It starts out as green berries on the vine, and then the way they get the black peppercorns is they pluck all those off and then they sun dry them, and that's how you get black peppercorn. The part I thought was especially interesting is when she's talking about white peppercorn, which I'm not sure about where you're at, but especially in stores in this area, anytime you try to find white peppercorn, it's already a little bit tricky to track down in just general supermarkets. It's there sometimes, but usually if it's white peppercorn, I tend to go over to like World Market or something like that, because they tend to have a little bit more specialized and what would be labeled in the aisle around here as ethnic seasoning, when you want something that's like not white people type flavoring. Yeah, you'd have to go to places sometimes like World Market, or I do have a Chinese seasoning market in my area, but it's a little bit of a drive, so usually I can only go over there. It's over by where my post office is, the actual like hub post office. It's like 15-20 minutes out, so usually if I have to do any like seasoning shopping like that, I try to put it with post office strips and stuff like that. But yeah, typically to find white peppercorn, for some reason I tend to have to go to like specialty aisles for that. And in here, she mentions that the only big distinction between the two, peppercorn, black peppercorn and white peppercorn, is white peppercorn is just the pepper seeds with the black outer layer steamed off. Which is a little bit irksome to think about, because if you find white peppercorn in this area, it's also usually marked up. So that's fun. Okay, saffron. Saffron comes from the stigma of a white crocus bloom, the stigma being the little yellow part down in the center of the bloom. And the interesting part with this that I thought was she mentions that it takes nearly an acre of blooms, a whole acre, which makes sense when you think about it. But it takes a whole acre of blooms to harvest just 1 pound of saffron powder. Which, yeah, it makes sense because you think about like there's just a few little stems per bloom. So you would need a lot of it. But then when you think of it in the scope of that, it seems even more massive, that a whole, like an acre is a lot. When you're thinking about just harvesting these blooms. It's a decent sized piece of land. And so she mentions, I don't know if saffron is the most expensive. I don't know if anything's bumped it out of place, but she mentions that this is what makes it one of, if not the most expensive, one of the most expensive spices in the world. It's just the sheer work power it requires to even harvest just a little bit of saffron. Okay, what's the next one here? I had to rewrite my notes from the other night when I did this, because talking about reading from candlelight, I also had to make the notes by candlelight. So I felt very colonial trying to put the notes for this video together. And then once the power came back on and I saw what I had written down, I was like, oh, that's not going to make any sense when I try to read this on camera. So I had to rewrite all this stuff. So yeah, I'm just trying to make sense of this as I go along. I tried to put it in some kind of order. Okay, talking about star anise or anise. I always feel a little bit guilty saying that out loud, because I always feel like I get corrected. Because when I was a kid, I was taught to say it as star anise. But then whenever I've said that, I've always been corrected and said, no, it's star anise. So when this video came around, I was like, you know what? I'm going to look it up and see if anybody says anise. And I found out that apparently anise is the British English pronunciation and anise is the American English pronunciation. So I'm not technically wrong. I just have my grandmother to blame, I guess, because my grandmother, the one that passed away this past March, just shy of her 100th birthday, the one that did all the world traveling, that was the grandmother I had that actually spoke in that mid-Atlantic accent that you hear a lot in old black and white movies. The one that's commonly attributed to like Katharine Hepburn and a lot of those actresses from, the 30s and 40s talkie movies. My grandmother actually had that accent. She wasn't in the movies, but she did actually talk that way. So it's not surprising to me that the way she was saying it to me and how I learned to say it would actually be the British pronunciation. So all these years that I was getting corrected wasn't actually wrong. I was just using the other form of pronunciation. But anyway, talking about star anise, which just sounds prettier to say for me. Apparently that comes from the buds of a tree that belong to the magnolia family. She doesn't specify that it's specifically the magnolia family, just whatever tree they pull that from is in that magnolia type tree. And then I wrote down for ginger, the only note I had about ginger, was just because it blew my mind, was she mentions that there are documented 400 different types of ginger. And initially I was thinking, like, who has the energy to document all that? But apparently somebody did, because we know, I guess, as a little factoid, that there are 400 known types of ginger. That's the only fact I had for that. That just blew my mind. But talking of the ginger family, she brings up, I don't know if I'm saying this right because I don't think I've actually cooked with it, but I think it's called galangal. She mentions this is part of a ginger family and used a lot in Southeast Asian cuisine. And galangal is typically blended with onions, garlic, and lemongrass to form a spice paste that you'd use for spicing meats, usually. But she mentions that you can also just slice it straight up and throw it into soups and stir fries. And funny to read this as my voice is going in and out, but she mentions that galangal and honey mixed together are often used as a cough suppressant. So I'll throw up a picture of it that I looked up because, like I said, I wasn't familiar with this one, but looking from the pictures, it looks like it's kind of like a cross between ginger and like sweet green onion. All right, where did I leave off? Whenever I do these whipping chats, I don't end up doing much whipping, I guess. But yeah, mainly I do these just to, I don't know, give you guys something to listen to. I say as my voice is going out. So yeah, all the people that over the years that have commented that they like when my voice gets in the lower range, here you go. I mean, my voice tends to be in the lower range anyway. I was always getting yelled at as a kid to speak up, Angie. But yeah, you're gonna get the low range. So okay, what was I doing here? Talked about galangal. So then there's garlic. And I think I've read this before, that garlic is considered part of the onion family. Kind of makes sense because I'm actually not a huge fan of a ton of onion in food. Like, I don't think I made note of it, but she also mentions in this cookbook that she tends to be a fan of shallots over onions, which, I mean, it's not basically the same thing, but just in smaller form. But I am also of the camp that I prefer shallots over traditional onions. I think just because when I was growing up, my dad was a huge onion fiend. He loved onions in everything. And I think I was just so traumatized when I was a kid of just the constant smell of my mom chopping up green onions and white onions and purple onions for everything all the time, that I got so grossed out by that smell all the time in everything that when I cook now, I very rarely ever use strong onions in anything. I've occasionally, naturally used it, used like sweet onion, spring onion, that kind of thing, chopped up in like omelets and stuff. But outside of that, I mean, sometimes if I'm making chili, it's pretty common to put onion in there, obviously. But I use in like very small amounts. So if I'm trying a new recipe and I'm going to the store and I gotta get an onion for something, I'm usually trying to find like the smallest onion in the batch, or I try to see if I can get away with using shallots because sensory-wise, shallots don't bother me as much. But I'm also a huge fan of garlic. I'm one of those people that, just like, it'll tell you how much garlic to put, and then I'll put like a couple extra doses in there because I love the smell of fresh chopped up garlic. I will use that over onion if I can get away with it. But it's not surprising to read that it's all part of the same family anyway. So a lot of times it works if you want to do it that way. She also mentions that it's common to see some people use a blend of garlic and honey mixed together as sort of like a DIY homemade way to lower cholesterol. Little disclaimer here so people don't come at me. If it doesn't work for you, I'm not giving medical advice. I'm just sharing the information she shared in her book. I'm not a medical professional, so if it doesn't actually lower your cholesterol, if you want to try it, I'm sorry. I'm not deeming it as a cure-all. I'm just saying she mentions that she's seen it growing up as a way that people kind of do that at home. If you want to try it, knock yourself out. If it doesn't work, not my problem. Turmeric and ginger, since we're talking about ginger and garlic and honey and all that kind of spiciness stuff. Turmeric and ginger, I was surprised to hear, is part of the lily family. And one of the little tidbits I wrote down that I thought was interesting is she talks about anytime you've seen the pictures of like that like really intense golden yellow color you see on Buddhist monk robes, she mentions that they intentionally dye the cloth in turmeric, especially to get that color, especially for the antiseptic quality of turmeric. And I'm sure them being monks, there's likely also a spiritual reason for choosing that color. I don't know. I'm not I'm not a monk. I'm not Buddhist. Even though I follow some of the tenets of Buddhism, I'm not traditionally Buddhist. But yeah, I don't know. There might be religious connection, but that's all she mentions in the book, is that the color comes primarily from the use of pulling the antiseptic qualities of the turmeric to use in the cloth, which I just found interesting. She talks about cooking with basmati rice, which the only note I put for basmati was that basmati, I guess, translates to queen of fragrance, which makes sense because it is an incredibly fragrant rice, and it is one that I tend to use over traditional. I will use white rice from time to time, but over the years I've tended to develop a preference for either basmati or jasmine rice, just because for me, I think it cooks better and it blends better with seasoning. It's a little bit more interesting to the palate than just plain white rice, even though I've eaten a ton of plain white rice too. I don't have any issue with white rice. It's just, again, personal palate preferences. That's hard to say. Why did I put myself in that position to say that? But yeah, I'll just say it again. Personal palate preferences. That's all we're talking about here. We're not knocking anybody's diet. We're just having conversation about what's up in your spice cupboard. Have you heard of any of this stuff? It's just an interesting topic to kind of hammer out. Let's see something else. Oh, speaking of rice, by the way, since we're on the topic, may I also just do a PSA? If you are someone who cooks at home, I would just like to encourage you to take the time to wash your rice. That is one of the little training lessons that I do remember picking up from Cora growing up, my mom's Filipina bestie. That was one thing she preached to me from the time I was little, because that is one of the things that we did a lot to pass time. I don't remember her having she might have had a little bit of dial-up internet back then, but I don't think she had a lot of high-tech stuff going around. I remember her two sons, who were adoptive sort of brothers to me, because we all grew up around each other. I remember they had gaming systems, but I think it was just standard plug into the wall type gaming systems. It wasn't online features. And I was pretty little for a lot of the time that I spent over there, because it was my early school years. But that was pretty much how we passed the time, is I would help her with the cooking. I would help her with the crafts, because her story is that she had a whole other family with her first ex-husband in the Philippines, and then they divorced, and I think by that time her kids with him were mostly grown, and then she met and married the sailor guy American guy that she ended up meeting, and then moved with him to the States, and they ended up having their two sons that I grew up with. So she would get attached to me because I was sort of like an extension of like the daughters in the Philippines that she couldn't see as much. Um, so yeah, she got to kind of relive and do like the girly things all over again with me, I guess. And so that was like learning how to do that cooking and learning how to do the crafts. And she would sit me down with like little plates of lumpia and want to talk about boy stories and boy problems and give me advice on all of that kind of stuff. Really miss her. Been thinking about her a lot lately. But yeah, in the spirit of Cora, I would like to preach to wash your rice, because I got that drilled into me so much back then. And I heard it so much from her growing up that I'm like, oh yeah, of course. And then I grew up and I found out how many American women actually don't wash their rice. And I guess it's because the community I grew up in San Diego, the little bubble I was in, it was actually primarily a lot of different ethnicities around. And in that little community, white people were actually the minority. So I had a lot of Asian and Mexican influence around me growing up with my mom's friends and people she worked with and stuff. And so between my Asian neighbors and my Mexican neighbors, I saw them all the time washing their rice. And so when I grew up and moved away from that area and started traveling the country a little bit and seeing other people, I noticed it wasn't as much of a thing around white American households. Some people picked it up, but it wasn't really preached as much in the white households, apparently. So as a white girl who grew up in those areas, let me preach to you. It does make a difference. It makes your rice insanely fluffier, because when you're doing the washing, you're cleaning all the starch and dirt and funk and whatever is on those rice grains. You're cleaning all that off so that when you go to cook the rice, it comes out fluffier and softer. It absorbs the seasoning of all your other foods way better. It's just nicer overall. It's a little extra step that might feel a little bit annoying if you don't have a lot of energy, but there are plenty of systems out there, tools, kitchen tools and stuff to help you with that. So yeah, just taking a little corner here to do a little PSA. If you are a big at-home cooker and you do a lot of rice, please wash your rice. Cora taught me the at least 3 times method, which is what I do now. I typically go 3, 4, sometimes 5 if it feels especially funky, depending on what it was stored in or whatever. But yeah, typically at least 3 wash throughs on the rice. And with rice water, I just throw it out on my flower plants or flower beds or whatever, so I'm not like just dumping the water down the drain. I try to be as eco-friendly in my life as possible. So yeah, I tend to throw the rice water out in the bushes. So far, they don't seem to mind. They seem all right with it. And my rice comes out nicer. So yeah, PSA done. Just thought I would mention that real quick. Let's see, what was the next one? Oh, I put a note on coconut milk, simply because there was a line in the coconut milk section that I thought was kind of funny. She said, there's a line where she says, in Southeast Asia, monkeys are trained to identify ripe coconuts. And I just kind of laughed picturing that, because like, no knocking on her for saying that. I just had the thought that you probably don't have to train the monkeys too hard to do that, because they're monkeys. They're up in the trees anyway. They got to find the food that's good for them. I'm sure they don't want to eat unripe fruit any more than anybody else. So I thought, I don't know, there's the picture of that, of like humans coming out to teach monkeys what the ripe fruit in the trees looks like, just struck me as funny. I'm like, they probably got a good method going on. They're probably just humoring you to be like, oh yeah, no, thanks for showing me this. That's great. Anyway, I don't know. That's just a weird passing thought that my brain had that I thought was funny. It was like, we trained the monkeys. I'm like, yeah, probably not. They probably went up in the trees. I'm like, yeah, I think we got it. Thanks. What's the next one? This is another one I wasn't familiar with, so I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but pandan, I think it's pandan. She says it's a member of the screw pine family, which when I read that, I was like, great, what's a screw pine? Another thing I had to look up because I wasn't familiar with the term, but so yeah, when I looked it up, it looks like it's probably in the palm family of trees. The type of leaves it has, it looks very similar to what we call saw palmetto out here in the South, or also out west, yucca plants have that type of kind of long, I want to say like sword-like almost type leafing, where it's like triangular at the end, but very long and sharp. And a lot of times, I don't remember if yucca plants, it's been a while since I've been around yucca plants. I don't remember if they're serrated at the edge of the leaves, but saw palmettos do have that sort of spikiness at the end of their leaves. That I've run into, and times where I've gone hiking on trails that have a whole bunch of saw palmetto, and you brush up against them and you're like, ow. So yeah, it looks kind of like it's in that family. It has that similar look. So yeah, I guess palm-like type plant. But whenever this is used, they say the flavor is aromatic and sweet. And this is another line that struck me as interesting, at least the wording. She said the flavor is aromatic and sweet and as important to Asian cuisine as vanilla is to Western food. And for a minute I was like, is vanilla particularly important in Western food? But then I was thinking about how much hidden sugar is famously known to be in a lot of Western food, because just that's one of the things I've always heard exchanged back and forth between people that travel from the US to like other countries. I hear a lot from people that when they're in their country and then they come over here, they talk about the food being overly sweet or overly salty or something like that. And then when Americans go overseas, they talk about how the food has no flavor. So yeah, I was thinking like there probably is some connection or correlation there between I don't know if like vanilla specifically, I guess maybe just thinking like in sweeteners in general tend to be used a lot in Western food, which is a struggle for me because I tend to be one of those super taster people where that's another reason why there's a lot of food that I've just given up eating very much over the years, because like I mentioned with ketchup, whenever I try to eat ketchup, all I can taste is sugar in ketchup and I don't get any like big tomato flavor, so it's not very enjoyable for me as like a topping on anything, so I tend not to use it. A lot of times when I get pizzas, I tend to go for pizzas that have either a pesto or Alfredo. I mean, I do eat pizza that's normal as far as like the standard tomato base. I do eat those from time to time, but I tend to have a preference for pizzas that are either Alfredo based or pesto based because of that tomato and ketchup and stuff family thing. It's also because over the years, when you go through the diagnosis process of things like lymphedema and other autoimmune stuff, one of the things they tend to ask you to do is to go through a trigger foods process where you have to go through all this long process of trying to figure out what foods are secretly triggering your inflammation in your body so that you can figure out how to eliminate that. And I've found out, and it tends to be different for everybody, because even though humans are, generally made up the same, obviously, so that we have a body of medicine we can study, everybody has their own little quirks and traits and things that are tied to like their particular genetic makeup and family history and all of that stuff. So it gets a little bit different from person to person what your trigger food is going to be. And I found out one of mine is actually tomatoes. So over the years, I've given up eating a lot of stuff that's tomato based. I still will eat it every once in a while. I just have to, it's, one of those things where when you get into a type of lifestyle where you have to make sense of an autoimmune condition, a lot of times people that live with it for a while, they tend to have to make the decision of like, it's not that if you eat it, it will necessarily kill you or make you violently ill per se, but there are things that if you know it's going to trigger your inflammation, you have to make the decision of if it's worth it to have that inflammation flare for that moment. Sometimes people do it if there's a celebration you're going to do, or things that you used to like in the past before you knew what your food triggers were, and you just want to experience it again. Sometimes people just decide to do it anyway. Like for me, especially this time of year, one of the exceptions to the tomato rule I have is that a lot of times in the summertime, I love at least once or twice through the summer season, I love having a big beefsteak tomato sandwich, which is just the tomato, specifically beefsteak style tomatoes, which are the massive looking ones that you can actually slice up like almost like a piece of meat, because they are so thick and hearty looking. You basically just slice those down and make that a center of a sandwich, and then you can put salt or herbs or whatever on there. I tend to like to do it on toasted bread, and then you put mayo or whatever bread topping you want on that. So yeah, tend to do that. That's one of my cheats as far as like the inflammation. I do that a couple of times during the summer, where I'll do that and just take on whatever inflammation happens just because I like it. So yeah, she's talking about that. The other thing I thought was interesting when she's talking about pandan is she mentions that how it tends to be used to flavor rice and make rice puddings and different types of desserts and things like that. But then she says it's also used to wrap chicken. And I laughed a little bit because it triggered a memory I had of years ago watching an episode of I haven't watched it in a long time, but Worst Cooks in America, I think that's what it's called. It's a Food Network show. I don't even know if it's still on. It might be, but this was like in an early season, I think. I don't remember. I tried to look up to see if I could find a clip of it to include in this video, but I couldn't find this particular clip. But it was one of the episodes, because they tend to switch out who the expert chefs on that show are, from what I remember. But the episode I saw that stuck in my memory was they teamed up Anne Burrell and Robert Irvine as the professional chefs, and it was this show where they brought on people that didn't really have hardly any cooking experience at all to work with these professional chefs. And basically it was kind of a comedy like show where they sort of showcased how bad the kitchen skills of these people were, and the people would volunteer for the show, so it wasn't like they were thrust into a situation they didn't know about. But the format they used to use is that whenever they were introducing people onto the show, before they would give them recipes to try to learn, they would invite people to show the professional chefs what a classic recipe they would do at home would be. And I remember there was one lady who came in, and the idea was you're supposed to prepare the meal and then plate it and bring it to the chefs, and they were going to give you their opinions on it. And this lady brings this plate of chicken, and Anne and Robert are eating it, and they have the weirdest look on their face, and they're trying to figure out what the flavor is. And Robert Irving just finally comes out and says, what is that exactly? What did you do here? And she goes on to explain that it was basically like chicken soaked in vanilla, I think she said. And Amberell's trying so hard to just not say something, but like trying to keep like a professional, oh, really kind of face. And there was a pause after the lady mentioned that it was vanilla on the chicken. There was this like great pause just for a moment. And then Robert says, but why? Just, I remember that episode just clicked into my memory, because that's just, I have that reaction to so many things in life when I see people do things sometimes, and I'm just like, but why? So I just that thinking about things where she's talking about, I don't know, like the combination of like, I don't know if she's saying like pandan was specifically vanilla flavored, but I guess it got caught up in my brain of like her talking about it's as important as vanilla is to Western culture. So I'm putting like a vanilla relation to it. And then she's talking about wrapping it in chicken. And then I instantly remembered that, that episode of the vanilla chicken on Worst Cooks in America, and Robert being like, but why? Yeah, I just made a note of that because I thought it was funny. And then going on to talk about paneer. I hear paneer mentioned a lot more in recent years, and as far as like cooking shows and stuff. I think people are experimenting with it more now in Western culture than just a few years ago. So if you weren't familiar, paneer is a curd cheese type of recipe where basically you add something as like acidic level, as far as like lemon juice or vinegar or something like that. You add that to a warm milk to make the milk curdle up and create a texture that's similar to like tofu or mozzarella cheese. So she talks about different paneer recipes and techniques and things like that. So I just thought I would throw that in for anybody that didn't know what paneer was, if you hear that thrown around a lot. And then she talks about chana dal and tur dal. Chana dal being a relative of chickpeas, but specifically it's yellow split peas, and then tur dal is split lentils. It sounds weird for me to say that because it sounds like Toradol, which is actually it's a medication used in the West that's like, I think it tends to be like a muscle relaxant, if I remember right. I forget exactly, but that's what my brain is relating it to right now. But no, this is Toradol. But yeah, it sounds very similar to Toradol, which tends to be, if I remember right, tends to be given out for like torn muscles and that kind of thing. I'm trying to go through these a little bit quicker because my camera battery is going a little bit low. Oh, there were a few things in this book that I wanted to read out, just a few little excerpts that I thought were interesting. Almost to the end of this. So she mentions palm sugar, and these last few I thought I would just read just because the way she writes them is interesting as far as the process of doing some of these ingredients. She mentions palm sugar. Palm sugar trees are abundant in Thailand and Malaysia, and when the trees are about 20 years old, their sweet sap can be extracted from the young yellow blossoms to make palm sugar. During the harvest, the farmer will climb up on these sturdy trees and carry with him several bamboo cylinders where the sap is collected. The raw sap is then filtered and boiled in a very large wok until the sap is caramelized and turns a deep red color. The sap has now been transformed into sweet palm sugar. The palm sugar is placed into molds or woven palm leaf containers to be sold at nearby markets or exported. It has a delicious caramel flavor and is an important balancing agent in Southeast Asian dishes. Even a very spicy chili dish will lose its intensity with the additions of palm sugar. It can be sold in block form, wrapped in plastic packets or in jars, and at most Southeast Asian grocery stores in America. I don't know if I've come across it, at least in block form, in Asian stores around here. I mean, like I mentioned, in my area, there's only like 2 I know of as far as Chinese markets, and I don't think I've seen it there before. I don't know. I don't know how well it is to upkeep in climates out here. But I just thought that process was interesting. And then she mentions the process of getting soy sauce, which I don't tend to use soy sauce very much because one of my other conditions long before I found out any of the autoimmune stuff I have now. I was diagnosed with hereditary hypertension when I was 20, I think. So pretty much my entire adult life, I've been on medication for that, because it's basically the type that's not diet based. I can't really do much about it. I've cleaned up my diet to a scary level in the past, where I've gotten myself down to like a size 4 or 5 at one point in my life. Didn't do anything for the hypertension. The hypertension barely budged, no matter how clean I made my diet. So it's just one of those things that's just in my DNA, in my bloodline, that I have to take a medication for. So I tend to stay away from soy sauce. But I thought the process she talks about making it was interesting. So she says soy sauce is made from soybeans that have been washed, soaked, and pressure cooked in large steel vats. Ground wheat and cultures are added to the cooked beans, and after several days of fermentation in a controlled environment, the beans will turn greenish and then are transferred to tanks and covered in brine to ferment for several more months. The mixture is finally filtered, pasteurized, and bottled as soy sauce. What does not turn into sauce is sold in the markets as salted beans or yellow bean sauce. And then she goes on to talk about there are a lot of different types of soy sauce you can try, so you can have some fun with trying different ones. She goes on to talk about like sweet soy sauce, which is flavored with the palm sugar I talked about before. And then the other one I wanted to go over was what she calls candle nuts, which is another one of the plants where I'm like, I don't know what that is. So I had to go look it up. And it turns out, after I did a little Googling on this, it looks like candle nuts. She says in here that it's native to Malaysia and Indonesia, but it apparently is also, I don't know if it's a different variety, but when I went to Google it, the kukui tree from Hawaii, it's apparently the state tree of Hawaii, that kept coming up in the search results. So I'm guessing it's a different variety of that. Seems to make the same looking fruit. But yeah, she says candle nuts are native to Malaysia and Indonesia, and the candle nut tree grows up to 50 feet and produces small white flowers that grow in clusters at the end of their branches. The fruit from the flowers are called candle nuts. Candle nuts, known as biji kemiri in Indonesian, are round, waxy, and cream-colored, and are related to the macadamia nut, which I was wondering about, because when I was looking at the pictures online, I was like, it looks kind of like a walnut. So yeah, walnut, macadamia nut, that's kind of what you're looking at here. The nut has an oily consistency, and when pounded into a paste, adds texture and a delicate flavor to seafood dishes. Candle nuts can also be found at Southeast Asian grocery stores or even Mexican markets. I don't recall ever coming across them when I grew up around Mexican markets when I was a kid, but I don't know. I could have spots in my memory. I don't know. She does put a she does put a note in here that says never eat candle nuts raw, as they will cause stomach disorders. Yeah, let's not do that. But she also mentions if you have something that calls for candle nuts in a recipe, but you don't have any, you can use macadamia nuts as a substitute, because they're close enough in style, type, and all that. So yeah, those are just some of the interesting little factoids I thought I would share from that book. The cookbook in general, as I've mentioned, it has an emphasis on Asian cuisine, goes into a little bit of specifically Indian dishes, which Indian is part of Asian culture. So yeah, she talks about Indian and Southeast Asian type cooking. There are recipes in here for homemade soy sauces, peanut sauces, sweet and sour sauce, korma flavorings. She talks about how to do curries and tofu dishes, pad thai, light salads that have Asian inspirations. There's also dessert sections, because that tends to be how cookbooks are laid out. You have like the appetizers and the snacks and main dishes, and then desserts typically. So she has a dessert section where she talks about chocolate and coconut and cardamom and doing fruit and nut plates and things to do with warmed milk and all that kind of thing, and also how to do crepes and cakes and puddings and all that. So if all of that is your style of cooking, your palate, your style of palate, I would recommend having a look at this. I will link it down below if I can find it on Amazon. It's an older book. I think it came out in the early 2000s. Let me see. 2008 it looks like. So yeah, I'll see if I can find it on Amazon. Also check out Thrift Books, might have a listing. I'm not an affiliate for them. I just have used them a lot in the past when I'm trying to find books that are kind of either out of date or not out of date, like out of rotation or circulation. I'll find the word. Yeah, not as readily available on Amazon as maybe immediately current books. I tend to use Thrift Books in the past, or another one I like to use is Better World Books, simply because Better World Books tends to put a large portion, or so they say, I don't know. I'm not their tax accountant, so I don't know for sure, but their setup is they tend to use a portion of their proceeds, as far as what they make from the reused or resold used books. They tend to put it back into creating libraries in other parts of the world. So I tend to like to use them a lot too, and also because the books tend to be dirt cheap over there compared to getting them on Amazon. So if you'd prefer not to use Amazon, those can be other alternatives. So I'll take a look over there and see if I can find them. But yeah, that's what I got for this. Sorry we didn't get too far on this painting. This tend to be how the WIP and chats go. I get into the chatty part of it, but hopefully I kept you company for a little bit, and I'll try to get this edited and see how it goes. So yeah, I'll finish this up and then probably do a reveal in the afternoon sometime tomorrow. Get a little sun on this. I'll give you a little sampler though. You can see the sparkle on the Diamond Dots quality diamonds. So yeah, I'm just gonna finish filling in the red bits here, and yeah, I'll probably wait for tomorrow when the sun is up again to get some good light on it so you can get the full effect. So yeah, as you can hear, my voice is starting to go, so I'm gonna go try to fix this up. But yeah, thanks for watching, thanks for stopping by, and we will talk soon. Bye guys.